Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chasing a Murderer. Today we are on part 2, covering the Doomsday Mother, Lori Vallow, her upcoming trial for Charles Vallow and Brandon Boudreaux. And you guys have been eager to kind of go over this witness list, and so we're going to do that. All right, bear with us, guys. Today, if you hear a bit of banging, I'm not being beat. It's crazy windy today. We have a bit of a front coming through. It's a freezing 68 degrees today in Florida. So again, we learn that Lori Vallow is prepping to go to court or to trial for the murder of, or she calls it self-defense, of Charles Vallow and the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. This happened in Arizona, 2019. One of the first people on her witness list is Nate Eaton of East Idaho News, a reporter that's been covering this story and some of the trial. Nate Eaton was already called a witness once back when they had their trials in Idaho for the death of her two children, Tylee and JJ, and Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell. Of course, East Idaho News helped Nate get out of that one. It's really frowned upon to call on a reporter as a witness. It seems that after Lori Vallow was convicted in Idaho for murdering her two children and Tammy Daybell, she reached out to Nate Eaton through letter or email. It seems that Lori has a lot of access to reach out to people. In her recent interview with Keith Morrison from Dateline, she said that, Keith said that his team had been communicating with Lori while she's been behind bars. Now, Justin Lum, who has not got credit enough for his ability to stay on top of this case ahead of time and keeping people informed, we referred to him as Document Man, informed Nate that he was a witness once again in Charles Vallow's trial.
Why am I on the witness list? I have no idea. I didn't know I was. Justin Lum from Fox 10 in Phoenix let me know the other day, and then I got this document. But I have not been served a subpoena. And until I'm served a subpoena, from what I've been told by attorneys, I'm fine. Now, I'm in Arizona for another little bit of time, and then I'm flying home tonight to Idaho. If Lori, from the way I understand it, Lori would need to issue a subpoena in Arizona for me, and then Idaho would need to recognize the subpoena, and then I would get served the subpoena in Idaho, and at that point, I would get my attorney involved to quash the subpoena.
So why would Lori be interested in Nate Eaton being a witness for the defense? Well, it makes no sense whatsoever. He couldn't help the case at all. Other than Lori would blame the media for telling lies and turning everything into something that wasn't true. I believe most people have speculated that it's just a way to make things difficult for Nate and East Idaho News, cost money, and cause aggravation. Now, many people who have ever been on her crap list know what to expect from her. Lori has a long history of causing or creating problems for people she doesn't like. Let's jump back to 2002 to about 2007 when Lori Vallow was going through a very treacherous, toxic divorce from Joe Ryan. She had accused him of abusing the kids in many ways, was never proven. Looking back now, it's most likely a complete lie. She and Alex had planned to harm Joe Ryan, possibly even kill him, according to several people who have been witnesses to what Lori and Alex said. They chased him down, they stalked him, and then they tased him to where he had to go to the hospital and get looked over. What we were told was their initial plans were supposed to be they tase him, put him in the trunk, drive off somewhere to a quiet, secluded place, and did a job in order to take his life and get rid of him. Lori even used a court system in order to try to make Joe Ryan carry life insurance. To me, and this is my opinion based on my research and my understanding of Lori, this was a warning to Joe Ryan that she didn't want him here. And after he was gone, well, that money would go to Tylee. Fast forward to 2018, Joe Ryan passes away, suspiciously in my opinion, in April, alone in his apartment in his bed, and Lori Vallow found out about it. How? Somehow, she was listed as a person of contact if something ever happened to him. So she went through extremes in order to make Joe Ryan's life miserable. Yet she was telling people she was a victim to a man that was abusive to her children, to her, and her family had to have known about this. And why were they so accepting? They had to have been smart enough to figure out that when you're talking out loud about taking people's lives, that must not be okay, even if, they're a bad person. The reason why I mention this is we have the majority of people who are witnesses for Lori is her family members. Now, remember, before she and Joe Ryan divorced, she took him for everything he had, took all his money. Joe Ryan ended up bankrupt. Charles Vallow. Lori called him a zombie. A lot of people believe that was an excuse to try to take his life, and ultimately, allegedly did. Before that, she had taken every dime he had in the bank and left him nearly bankrupt. She told her family that Charles Vallow was the bad guy. He was cheating on her. Yet she was the one that abandoned her children. Was quickly having sexual intercourse with Chad Daybell after marrying or sealing themselves in the temple in order to make it seem correct. Everything that Lori does, she destroys, she creates chaos, and makes things work out to where it makes her look like she's doing it for a moral or loyal reason. So now let's talk about Janice Cox, Lori Vallow's mother. Janice Cox was a military brat. She grew up in several different states, moving around. She ended up marrying Barry Cox after he finished his mission. Janice Cox was a very family-oriented woman. Appearance of her family was important. She was involved with a lot of Lori's activities, especially as a preteen, was her softball coach. And she mentioned something on an interview once was a very important personality trait that helped you see more of Lori's determined and unwillingness to be a team player. Lori was a pitcher for her softball team. And her mom mentioned how Lori wouldn't take time off the mound, no matter the circumstance. Even then, Lori was determined and headstrong, and nothing mattered but what she wanted. It also showed signs of being obsessed with proving her point. Sadly, Lori's obsession would be her poison, and her refusal to ever be wrong was her needle. She was very competitive and always wanted to be the center of attention. Lori is more than willing to help you out if she can help you, especially, remember, she was a hairdresser and she would often love to help people do their hair and look a certain way that she thought might look good for them. But it was more controlling than helpful. The problem is if she suggested something or wanted you to do something and you didn't want to do that, well, that aggravated her. And she could turn from a very helpful person to an angry person in seconds. I do often wonder if she's bipolar or ADHD, maybe some type of personality disorder, maybe even some type of autism, which we won't know until we know she gets a complete physical and mental evaluation. Here's the problem is it's going to take some doctor some time to figure it out because you have to get to know her. You got to know that she is very good at playing a game. Until then, well, she'll continue to fall into those deep holes. Perhaps it all boils down to ideological differences, low self-esteem, or borderline personality disorder. We all know that BPDs are more susceptible to drawing into cults. And well, I'm kind of running down that rabbit hole again. This is a topic for another day. Let's go ahead and get back on track. To put it simply, you're going to have to be able to rip away that upper layer of paint and look underneath to figure out who this woman really is. Now, we do understand that Lori Vallow and her family have experienced their fair share of tragic events. They had the loss of their baby girl, Lolly, the loss of the adult daughter, Stacy Cox, from medical issues. If you would like extreme details on this case, well, you can go to my Life Beyond the Grave series, start with part 1. I think you'll find it interesting. Perhaps some of these devastating losses play a big role of who she is today. Perhaps also maybe play a huge role on her mental status today. Getting back to Janice Cox and why she's a witness for Lori, perhaps it might be because she tried to be a good mom, but also she wasn't very good at telling her children no. She had mentioned from the very start that her daughter Lori was a bit of a rebel. Lori seemed to like bad boys, sneaking around, getting married behind people's back and against the better judgment. Whenever Lori felt like her family wouldn't be in support of whatever she was doing, well, she would take off and hide. She has a very long history of doing this type of thing. Janice is not the only witness that is close to Lori. It's also her sister, Summer Cox. Remember this? We're going to talk a little bit. In an interview, I think it was in 2020 with AZ Family, the reporter mentions the fact that, Lori had gotten married and they were talking about her being a bit of a rebel. And Summer mentioned how Lori did not invite them to her wedding. But Lori's mom, being the protector she was, cut her off and mentioned that it's not that they weren't invited, they just didn't go. But in other interviews, Janice kind of suggested that, yeah, Lori never invited them to the wedding.
I think that Chad brainwashed her.
No, he couldn't do it. It's not possible. It wouldn't be possible. We can't speak intelligently about Chad and Lori. I think that, when you don't have any understanding, we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know we learned they got married on the news, right?
Yeah, we didn't know. We've never been invited to any of Lori's weddings, so this was not unusual for us.
We were invited, we didn't go to any.
I've never been invited to one, but that's fine.
How has this last year affected your family?
It's been devastating.
Janice had done an interview with someone else, I can't remember who it is, where she said that there was major problems with Lori getting married to these men between, that couple and their family. In this interview, you can see where Janice is wanting to paint a certain outlook of how the family looks. This is something Lori likes to do as well. And Lori's relationship with her family is very questionable. We know that a lot of times, there were times she just didn't want them there, and then others, well, many times she has treated her family as they were enemies. So that's a long history. The family is able to forget and forgive immediately and pick up where they want to lead off. There was a time when this was going on that Lori Vallow cut off her entire family. And she really didn't have anything to do with them until she was behind bars and Chad was behind bars, because she would need someone to help her. I mean, you got to have money. You got to have someone that can deliver messages, communication, find out information. In other words, she needs someone to get her what she needs. She can't get it for herself. It gives you an opportunity to see her personality changes depending on her needs, to know exactly who she can be, who can be useful to her, who's dependent on her needs and who she's dependent on, and to know, who has the limits and who will either open or shut the door. How in the world can Janice Cox benefit her on a witness stand? So there's no telling how Lori's going to handle this. She can use it as a way to manipulate her mother and the story, or as a way to punish her. We don't know who Lori will punish, but someone is going to be punished. You got to remember, even though Lori had shut them down, they were still very supportive of Lori, even when the kids disappeared, and even when Charles was shot. They were there to support Lori's story that Charles was the problem and not Lori. Now that the kids have been found, will this be the direction the family goes and they remain to be supportive of Lori, or will we see something else? Will they be, a nightmare for Charles and his family? Will they paint Charles as a monster? Well, we know that her sister Summer Shiflet is also called as one of her witnesses. We all know that Summer will bend over backwards to protect Lori, at least until she's cornered. That's exactly how she did, especially at the beginning. The whole world, we were liars and haters. We didn't know anything we were talking about. Lori could never do anything like that. Then the children were found in Chad's backyard. What could they say or support then? What I noticed is they did care what the public thought, even though they said they didn't. Summer, being interviewed multiple times after that, admitted that she was wrong, but at the same time, there were clues that she would still support Lori and what we believe are lies about Charles Vallow. So it's going to be interesting to see if Janice and Summer Shiflet continue to support Lori on her lies of Charles. Then you have Barry Cox. Barry Cox is Lori Vallow's dad. He's very much interested in law, very determined person. That's most likely where Lori gets that side from. The family's had a few run-ins with the IRS, and like I said, if you'd like more details on this, check out Life Beyond the Grave. It's a series covering the details on this case. Now, Barry Cox has been very quiet. No one's heard from him. Probably, there's been no interviews. We just have zero information on how he feels about all this. But we have had hints where they believe that Barry thought that his daughter had gone on the deep end at one point. And so this will probably be one of the most awaited witnesses that people will want to watch. People want to know, where does Barry stand with all this chaotic mess surrounding his family? Also, are any of these family members helping Lori with legal issues? And if they are, well, doesn't that make them to where they can no longer stand as a witness for her? We already know that Summer has reached out to Lori to tell her that when Chad was going to trial, that Chad planned to throw Lori under the bus. Supposedly this happened after the children were found and after she admitted she was wrong. So again, Barry Cox is just one of the family members that has stayed the quietest and we know less about. She's also calling on Adam Cox, her brother, that she said tried had plotted actually to kill her for her insurance money of $2 million. This was absolutely a complete lie, and she was not afraid to throw that on Adam, her own brother that she loves. We'll talk more on Adam. I'm going to have to do a third part. There's just too much information here that I can share with you guys. And then you have Zachary Cox. That's Adam's son. He's probably one of my most favorite in the Cox family. He's a very kind and loving young man, very well raised, very respectful. And he was actually living with Lori and Charles just before all of this went crazy. He knew that Lori Vallow was going off the deep end, that there was concerns, and Charles had concerns. And of course, like I've mentioned many times, you know, it was difficult because Charles would kind of switch back and forth or whether or not he wanted to do something about it. Why would Zach be a witness for her? Well, that's going to be interesting. We have to wonder if it's just a way to kind of throw in their face, you know, things maybe she did for them. His experiences as, you know, when they did family things. Because you got to remember that Tylee and Zach were mostly babysitters for JJ. Zach, Tylee, and JJ spent a lot of time together. They went to the movies. Zach had several communications with Lori where she told him that she had spoke to Satan. It doesn't make sense why she's going to use Zach as a witness, because he's traumatized by all this. He was more awake than any of them. So obviously, maybe Zach kind of sat in the middle between Charles and Lori during this chaotic time, and maybe gonna try to use Zach as a way to make Charles look a certain way. Or maybe it's just her way to face him and get some points in. Who knows? No one knows. So we're going to talk about how this is going to affect the prosecution part. We're going to talk more about the witnesses. We're going to also speak on another witness would not be a witness for her. I don't know why she's calling this guy. It was her landlord and a longtime friend of Charles Vallow, Joe. Well, she's calling on this guy, and my goodness, I don't think he's going to have anything really good to say that's going to help Lori out. All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. I want you guys to share your thoughts. For the next video coming up, I want to share comments on what you can expect from these witnesses. So share your thoughts below. Make sure that you subscribe, like, share. And don't forget about our missing girls out there. Their cases have gone cold, and their families are waiting for answers. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.